Your phone just buzzed and your heart rate ticked up before you even looked at it. Nothing dangerous happened. Nothing ever does, but some ancient tripwire inside you fired anyway. The same tripwire that once decided whether you live to see tomorrow. You'd assume that tripwire belongs to some smaller, simpler moment, a flinch, a jump scare. But the real answer is far stranger. That tripwire wasn't built for one moment. It was built for an entire day, a full 24 hours where every choice, every seat you picked, every hour you spent resting instead of moving was quietly organized around a single question. Will today be the day something eats me? Picture a small group waking up at first light, somewhere in the grasslands of what's now Tanzania, 40,000 years ago. There's no alarm because there doesn't need to be. Bodies wake with the sun, because for almost all of human history, the sun was the only clock anyone had. The first thing anyone does isn't eating or gathering tools, it's looking. A slow scan of the tree line, a pause to listen. Is that rustle wind or is it something with teeth? A dog might lift its head at nothing and go back to sleep. A human learned over 100,000 generations to never treat nothing as nothing. That single habit repeated every morning wasn't paranoia. It was maintenance. It kept people alive long enough to have children who would do the exact same thing tomorrow. So how much of the day actually went toward finding food? Less than you'd think. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent years living with the Hadza, one of the last hunter-gatherer groups on Earth, tracking exactly how they spent their time. What he found broke almost every assumption people carry about prehistoric life. The Hadza weren't grinding through 12 back-breaking hours just to survive until nightfall. Marlowe clocked their actual foraging and hunting time at somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a day. The rest wasn't free time exactly, it was something quieter, a steady hum of watching, of listening, of staying close to other people instead of drifting off alone. Men and women often split into different roles too. The men ranged further out after prey that was hard to predict. The women foraged closer to camp, for food that took longer to find but rarely got anyone killed. Neither choice was about comfort. Both were shaped by the same brutal math. How much food is this worth against how much risk? And that math shows up in places you wouldn't expect. Ancient humans weren't unusually brave, they were unusually careful. Where you sat mattered, who you sat beside mattered, which direction you faced mattered. The exposed edges of a group, the spots furthest from the fire or the trees, were never left empty for long. Someone was always rotating through them, watching. You still do a version of this. Think about how you pick a seat in a restaurant. Most people, without ever deciding to, choose the one facing the door. There's a reason groups settled into a certain size too, and it wasn't random. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying why humans across nearly every culture tend to form communities of around 150 people. His research found that number isn't a coincidence. It's roughly the largest group a single human brain can actually track, trust, and rely on. Every person in that group was, in a real sense, a sensor, more eyes on the horizon, more ears tuned for the wrong kind of silence. 150 people wasn't a village. It was a distributed alarm system, and every single member was both a guard and someone being guarded. Children weren't watched by their parents alone either. Aunts, grandmothers, even unrelated adults shared the job of keeping an eye on them, a practice researchers call alloparenting. More caretakers meant fewer blind spots. Nobody wandered off unnoticed. Nobody napped unguarded. None of this worked without memory. Elders carried something just as valuable as speed or strength, a lifetime of stored knowledge about which plants healed, which ones could kill you, where water pooled in the dry months, and which trails predators favored at which time of year. Losing an elder didn't just mean losing a person. It meant losing a walking map of every danger the group had already learned to survive. That's likely part of why grandparents mattered so much in early human groups. Their memory was itself a form of protection, passed down before anyone had a word for education. That same memory shaped bigger decisions too, not just what to eat, but where to even be. Groups didn't wander randomly. They moved with the seasons, following water as it shifted, avoiding valleys where a river might flood or a predator might den for the winter. A decision to relocate camp wasn't made lightly or alone. It came from pooled memory, dozens of people comparing notes on what they'd seen that week, what had changed since last year, whether a particular ridge felt different than it should. Moving too early wasted energy, moving too late could be fatal. Getting that timing right year after year was its own quiet survival skill, one that never showed up as effort but was working constantly underneath everything else. Physical closeness did some of this work too. Grooming, the simple act of picking through each other's hair for dirt and parasites, looks like nothing more than hygiene at first glance. Dunbar has argued it was actually a form of social glue, a way of confirming, touch by touch, exactly who you could trust and who had your back if something went wrong. Groups that groomed together stayed together, and staying together was, quite literally, how you stayed alive. Even childhood play was quietly built around this. Kids didn't need lessons in vigilance. They absorbed it through games that looked aimless but weren't. Mock hunts, freezing at the sound of a snapped branch, hide and seek that doubled as practice for staying perfectly still when stillness was the only thing keeping you alive. By the time a child was old enough to forage alone, watching the world had simply become how the world felt. Midday brought a strange kind of stillness. In the hottest hours when the sun sat directly overhead, most activity slowed down almost everywhere. This wasn't laziness, it was timing. Big cats hunt best at dawn, at dusk, and through the night when heat isn't draining their energy and shadows give them cover, which meant the safest hours to sit still were exactly the hours the sun made everyone miserable anyway. Tools got repaired in that window, a cracked spear point reshaped, a worn cord rebraided. Stories got told, and those stories usually weren't just entertainment. They were survival information dressed up as narrative. Warnings about a particular ravine or a particular animal wrapped inside a tale worth remembering. Alliances got quietly reinforced through nothing more than shared shade and idle talk. From the outside, it looked like rest. Underneath, it was scheduling. Now here's the twist that flips everything you'd assume about this. You'd expect total exhaustion by nightfall, people collapsing, wrung out from a day spent staying alive. But sleep researcher Jerome Siegel studied the sleep patterns of the Hadza and several other traditional societies across Africa and South America and found something nobody predicted. These groups slept around 6.5 hours a night on average, not the 10 or 12 hours you might picture for a slower, simpler way of life. They rarely napped either. Their sleep wasn't triggered by darkness falling, the way you'd guess. It was triggered by a drop in temperature hours after sunset, and it ended before sunrise, not after it. Sleep was shaped less by how tired anyone felt and more by a deep built-in sense of when it was actually safe to lose consciousness. Falling asleep is the single most vulnerable thing a human body can do. You're blind. You're still. You're exactly what a predator is built to find. So when did they choose to do it? Almost always around a fire. Fire didn't just keep people warm, it restructured the entire night. Before fire, darkness meant near total exposure, huddled and hoping. After fire, night became something closer to a shift change, someone always half awake tending the flame, glancing past its edge into the dark. It usually wasn't the same person all night either. The watch rotated quietly, without anyone announcing it, shifting from one lighter sleeper to the next as the hours passed, so no single set of eyes had to carry the whole night alone. Fire drew a line, a visible boundary between the part of the world you controlled and the part you didn't. Everything outside that flickering ring was still full of eyes catching the light and teeth you couldn't see. Everything inside it was, for a few hours, survivable. Add it all up and the day looks almost small. A few hours foraging, a few hours resting through the worst heat, a watchful evening by the fire, careful, monitored sleep, shorter than you'd expect. No meetings, no deadlines, no inbox, and yet somehow, none of it felt like free time, because every piece of it was quietly doing a job, watching, listening, positioning, and remembering. Running underneath every hour of it. A thread of vigilance that never fully switched off because it couldn't afford to. Here's the uncomfortable part. That thread never actually went away. It's still running in you right now, underneath a life where almost nothing is trying to eat you. Your nervous system never got the memo that the grasslands turned into a grocery store. It still checks the room when you walk in, it still flinches at a sudden sound before your conscious mind even catches up. It still fires off 47 times a day, scanning for something out there. Except there's nothing out there anymore. So it scans your phone instead. A notification lights up, and for a quarter of a second, some ancient part of your brain treats it exactly like a snapped twig in tall grass, worth checking. Might be nothing, might not be. A notification lights up, and for a quarter of a second, some ancient part of your brain treats it exactly like a snapped twig in tall grass, and you check it before you've even decided to. That's why total silence can feel unbearable to a mind built to treat silence as either complete safety or the quiet right before something goes wrong. It's why open, unstructured time can feel more stressful than a packed schedule, because a hunter gatherer brain was never built for unstructured time. It was built for vigilance disguised as rest. It's why you check that the door is locked twice, why you glance behind you on an empty street, why a message from a stranger can spike your pulse the same way a rustle in the grass once did. It's even why scrolling right before bed feels almost impossible to stop. One more check, one more pass over the horizon, before the ancient part of your brain will finally allow you to close your eyes. Even office design quietly proves it. People consistently feel calmer in a seat with a wall behind them and a clear view of the room, and more on edge with their back exposed to open space. The exact same math that once decided who guarded the edge of camp and who got to rest safely in the middle. None of that is a flaw in you, it's an inheritance. Anthropologist Marshall Solins, who studied hunter-gatherer economies, once argued these groups were, in a strange way, the original affluent society, not because they had more, but because they wanted less and worked less to get it. It's a strange thing to sit with. A species that spends its modern life chasing more free time once had it by default, and filled it not with rest exactly, but with something closer to shared, quiet watchfulness. Their days weren't consumed by labor the way we tend to imagine. They were consumed by something quieter and far more constant, a background awareness that never fully let go, because letting go, even for a moment, used to be how you died. You inherited that awareness, you just lost the reason for it. So it went looking for a new one, and it found your phone, your inbox, your feed, 100 tiny tree lines rustling all at once. You don't forage for food anymore. You don't scan a tree line for movement. But tonight, when you check your phone for the 48th time, you won't be looking for a predator in the grass. You'll be looking for a threat that isn't there, using a system built for a world that no longer exists. And the part of you doing the looking, the part that never fully rests, the part that's always half listening for something in the dark, isn't broken. It's just old, 50,000 years old. And it has never once stopped scanning the horizon for anything that might get you.